Welcome back to Perry Arts. Today we're going to be making a coil bowl. We're going to need a rubber rib, a tool to make scratches with, a brush for our slip. We'll need a sponge, and I find a wooden tool with a rounded tip sometimes helpful. This one's also sometimes helpful. Okay, so let's get started. Now, the thing about making a bowl is we need to start with the bottom. So we're going to make a round bottom. And I don't mind if it's not perfectly round, personally, because this is a hand-built bowl. I kind of go in for that organic kind of shape. And I'm not worried about the edges either, because I'm going to trim those off later. Now, I want my bowl to be about 2 cups worth. I think I need it a bit bigger than that. So I'm going to show you a trick. These videos are for my students at Bonzor. Not really anything else, but so I mean, they're not fancy, but anybody else who's interested, also if you're working at home. A tip is, if you're going to join 2 pieces of clay, you always have to use scratch and slip. Of course, there's an exception to every rule. If it's a really good smush, you don't need to use scratch and slip. But if you are going to put 2 pieces of clay together, flat sides, please, because we don't want to be trapping any air in there. So if we give that a good slap, pinch from the outside toward the edge, then we're absolutely sure we haven't trapped any air in there, and then we can go back and give it a good smush. And if you're a student of mine, you know that smush is a technical term in my studio. I just like to make that caveat. Okay, so I'm not really thrilled about that line there, so I'm just going to erase it with my finger eraser. And that's gonna just add a little dimension to my bowl. Okay, so tip for slabs, you might remember from the other demos, is compressing the particles with a rubber rib. This will help ensure that flat clay doesn't like to be flat, won't crack. And I'm taking off all my bits and throwing them into my slip, just because dry clay makes the best slip, just FYI, and it keeps my working space nice and clean, also free, and keeping that silica dust down, especially if you're working at home. You want to keep that silica dust to a minimum. Alright, so I've gone both directions with my rubber rib, both sides, and now I'm going to start my coil. I'm just going to put that aside so that I have some working space for my coils. Now I'm going to start off with a sausage shape in my hand, and I'm going to roll one direction, lift and back, and lift and up and back, and because we're going to roll a lot of these, we want to do it quickly. Extruder is a really good tool here if you have one, because then you can just extrude a whole bunch of coils all at once. But if you don't, and we're doing it by hand, then we do it like this. One direction, up, lift, other direction, lift. If you're lifting both sides, you'll get a nice even coil. But even if you're doing it right, sometimes you get a lumpy coil. If you go up and down like this, we will get a lumpy coil. If that happens, don't worry. Just lift your coil, give it a little twist, Put it back down and you're back in business. Now, the other problem we run into with coils is drying. So if you're building your coils and when you bend them, they're starting to crack here. This one's still pretty elastic, but if it's starting to crack, that's a problem. To avoid that, we just wet our canvas, and it's a good idea if you're rolling coils to just work on a damp canvas, and again, keeping the silica dust down. All right, so then we just give that another roll. That rehydrates the coil and you're back in business. But this one looks pretty good. So we're gonna go over to our base, put some scratches on it. And before we start building, this is when we take our writing tool and we write our name. On the bottom. Please, for all of my students, please do not forget this step. There's an awful lot of work that comes out of the kiln and I don't always recognize it. Okay, so another scratch on this side and a little slip. So if your slip is really watery, don't worry. If your slip is really thick, don't worry. If you're just using water, it'll work. And if you're a little concerned about mending cracks, for example, throw some vinegar in it. It seems to work. All right. We're just going to put this on here. Now you see I didn't really measure. And so I'm just going to give it a little smush there, another little scratch. And the question is, can I just keep going? And the answer is, of course you can. Just keep going. Whoops. But if that happens, just going to do a little mending job. Now this is an aesthetic choice to stop there on each level or just keep going. For our purposes, I'm going to show you how to erase that log cabin look, because a lot of people maybe don't choose to build their whatever they're making with coils because A, it might be time consuming, and B, they might be saying to themselves, well, I don't want that log cabin look. The thing is, it's still a really valuable way of working in hand building, and I'll show you how to get rid of that log cabin look. Now, you noticed a few of them started cracking there, and I am just mending those cracks as I see them at this stage. At this stage, your success with mending cracks is pretty good. So just use your finger, fix it. All right, we're rolling the next one. I can already feel that lump, but because it's still pretty early stage of the rolling, I can probably just roll it out. Sorry, I'm trying to keep all of these in your view. All right, so we're just going to carry on and add the second coil. Now, before I do that, actually, this is a pretty important step, depending on what this form is going to be, but because mine's going to be a soup bowl, I'm going to join this one with my finger. I'm just going to go like this and give it, and all that slip's going to ooze out. I'm going to wipe that off because that's just going to make my bottom want to crack, and it's also going to make my fingers slippery. That doesn't help. So we're taking care of the inside first while we have access to it. So you notice I'm just supporting the coils on the back side and giving it a good smush down here. And this is where we start to just settle into the project and do good craftsmanship, right? So just give this join here a little attention. Good art requires good craftsmanship. And certainly functional forms definitely require good craftsmanship. Now, while we're at it, we can just smooth that out, give it a little love, make it really nice, because this is the bottom corner of our soup bowl, so this is where all the soup's going to gather once we build the bowl. That part is going to be maybe a little difficult to get at, so let's do it. Take care of those details while we're here. All right, so as you may have noticed, I'm not worried about this edge just yet. I'm going to build up this side just a bit more, and then I'm just going to go in and cut that off. Which reminds me of the other tool we might need. A clay knife. This has been in use for quite some time, but still works, so there we go. And now we're just going to go in and get into the rhythm of this. We're going to settle in. It's not unlike the Zen doodling sort of mindset that you get into when you're doing something repetitive. And coils is definitely repetitive. So, and it's a little bit time consuming, but it's not time wasted. It's a good time to just sort of settle into the mindset of making something. And not thinking about other things. Taking a little brain break. Just focusing on making a good join. And good smush there. All right, now I'm going to go back over my coil, give it a good join. It is going to be very, very important that we connect each and every coil very well. All right, now we're going to go into the next level there. All right,